Okay, so thank you very much for joining. I'm Shlomo from Koren. We have recently published a book one day in October. It's 43 heroes, 43 stories that takes place on October 7th. The beauty of it is, and it really reflects, I think, in what's going on in Israel. It's not each story here is it could be a Bedouin, a Druzi, a Haredi, someone not religious, someone from the LGBTQ community. It's really from everywhere, and they have one common denominator. They're heroes. And I think this is really what I'd like to ask in general when we say, like in Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, it says, who is a hero? Ezehu gibor hakovesh et yitzro. Who is a hero? That's like we're used to thinking about heroes like Superman and Batman and Spider-Man. And each one of them, I'd say if I'd be Superman, I'd be a hero too. You know why? Because I'm going in, I'm doing a good thing, but I'm not putting myself in any danger, assuming no kryptonite is in the area. But all these stories are people that actually went in, and that's true. That is someone who is a hero, someone who went in and knows and really thinks that this might be the last time that he's ever going to live, and knowing that, you still go in. And that I think when we say who is a hero, who could sort of conquer his own yetzer, we're not saying which yetzer. There's a yetzer of fear. We have feelings of fear, and that we're able to conquer that and move forward. I think that is really what a gibor is about. And I'm just going to read three little stories, three different parts of three different stories, just to give you a feel of what it's about. Some of them you've heard of, some of them not. The first one is called I Didn't Just Stare Death in the Face, I Embraced It. And it was the first name is Mickey for a reason. There's no last name because he's one of the people that worked in the security forces. And so even in the interviews, I think he gave like 2 interviews, and neither of them was his face. It was all blurred. Like he's not able to show. But he's telling the little story, and I'd like you to think about all 3 stories, the common denominator of what drives someone to do what he does. And at the end, you'll see it's very cliche, but it's very true. So he says, never in my whole life did I think that the idea of killing my wife and my daughter would ever cross my mind for even a fraction of a second. But there was a point there when the terrorists were at the door of the safe room, a point when we realized that this was it. My wife and I look at each other in total silence when my daughter isn't looking, and my wife makes the sign of 2 fingers walking. She's basically saying without words, we're not going with them. Then she points her fingers like in a gun. She points it at herself, and then at our child, and then at myself. And she's basically saying, we're not leaving. If you have to, kill me, kill our daughter, and then kill yourself. So that's the entry of Mickey's story that we have. And he says, I'm Mickey. I used to be a member of the security forces. Now I work in agriculture. He came from the big city. He wanted a little change. It took him a long time to get used to where he lived in Nachal Oz. And then the story moves forward a little bit. He says, so I'm in the safe room with my wife and our little girl. And I remember asking myself, after running to the campground and the shelters, I asked myself, how long has it been already? It suddenly hits me that it's been a long time. This wasn't the regular rate of mortar bombs. In those seconds, I realized this must be a terrorist infiltration. And before I can even process that, we start hearing gunfire. At first, it was at the perimeter of the kibbutz. I also thought it was the army or something, maybe even some incident on the border fence. It happens sometimes, but then I realized that the shooting is getting closer and closer to us. It sounds louder and louder, Kalashnikov shots. At the same time, we start receiving WhatsApp messages that there are terrorists in the kibbutz and that they're entering homes. And suddenly we hear Arabic everywhere. And we hear tons, masses of terrorists outside. They're shooting with megaphones in Hebrew and English. We're Hamas, we're Izzadin al-Qassam. The kibbutz is ours. The IDF isn't here. Whoever's in the house, come out and surrender. If you do not come out, we will come out to get you. At this point, we had no network and no electricity. I tell my wife and daughter to stay completely quiet, and I sneak out of the safe room. So he comes, he has 1 Glock, and he has a few cartridges, and that's what he's now dealing with, and he knows what the end may be, but he's going to try everything to do in his power for that not to happen. And the story goes on how they start going through the windows, one by one, 1 bullet, 1 bullet, 1 bullet. 3 terrorists go through the window, he kills them. They start going through the front door, and there's a number, and then they take an RPG. And he realized at one point, and he speaks to them in Arabic, and he's saying, "What are you doing? I'm an Arab." And he says his name, a different name, and they're like, "No, but it says a different name on the door," meaning he realizes that he's a target, that they want him alive. They're specifically there for him. They had so much information that he was targeted, and he at no means is he willing to go. In the end, he ends up going through. They try going through the miklat, through the door, and they punctured it with bullet holes. And they had it, and finally, when they told him surrender, he said, "Okay, I'll surrender, but just give me 2 minutes to say goodbye to my family." And then he makes a sound as if he's lowering his gun, and the person with the RPG, he lowers the RPG for a second, and that split second he's able to shoot the person with the RPG. So he actually did survive this. But I think the message that he's saying, and this is powerful. He says, "There's something else in this whole story that gives me strength. There's an expression: I stare death in the face. Me, I didn't just stare death in the face. I embraced it. I made my peace with it. I even thought of helping it along. What would have happened if my wife and I had given up? If after they blew up the door to our safe room, we had just given up? To tell you the truth, it terrifies me. It terrifies me to think about it. I was certain that we weren't going to make it. A few times I was convinced of that, absolutely certain. But somehow I got through the whole story and my family is still alive. And today I can say with absolute certainty, En Yeush Ba'olam. There is no despair in the world. That's a very strong feeling of mine. There's no despair. There's no such thing as giving up. Even when you see the end, even when you're sure that it's over, don't give up. Never, ever give up." So that's one story. That's Mickey's story. And again, that had he at the beginning let it play out, he wouldn't have been alive to tell this story. And the fact that he waited for the last second, he tried everything in his power. It really was a one-man show in this case. And it saved his entire family. He had another child that was with someone else, and the child also survived. The next story is Yadin Gelman, and I also heard him in an interview. He was great. So it's a beautiful also love story. His girlfriend's name was Adva, and the first time he said, and Adva was there in a red dress, beautiful and delicate but powerful. I saw her and just fell in love. I just fell in love right away. So right away you could tell about Yadin, a certain personality, who he was, a romantic. And this is really, you can see why I'm reading this specific part, because it did have an effect on how he stayed alive in the end. In the morning, and this is, they had a whole birthday party for him, a surprise birthday. It was beautiful. Everyone loved it. Best day of his life. And then they hear the siren. In the morning, she wakes me up and says, "Yadin, I'm sorry, but there's a war. Look at your phone." I didn't understand what she was talking about. It came out of nowhere. No one had any intel, so I turned on my phone and saw a message from my commander: "Everyone come as soon as you can." So they started going. We reached Route 232. We passed a police barricade and saw what's known now as the Road of Blood. The whole road was lined with cars and bodies, a crazy number of people who were murdered there, lots of burnt cars, lots of missiles falling to the right, to the left, and we're all on high alert. And again, just to make that change of, you're just 2 hours ago, you're sleeping in bed, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the battlefield, that alone is enough to shake you up. At one point, a civilian car suddenly shot out of the kibbutz at breakneck speed. We spotted it and shot at the tires, and it stopped. We ran up the car and saw a terrorist at the wheel with 2 girls in the trunk. He was attempting to kidnap them. We apprehended him, tied him up, and sent him for interrogation. We evacuated the girls to Soroka Hospital. They were wounded and in shock. They had almost been taken hostage. And you see, slowly he realizes the importance of just what one person could do, how much you could save, how much you could do. There was a team from our unit, and the terrorists, as far as I could tell, were everywhere. Vast numbers of them, terrorists in every direction, 360 degrees. I even saw one hiding behind the blue slide in the playground. I remember that I suddenly saw the barrel of Kalashnikov sticking out of the kindergarten window. It hit me that the battle had begun. It was time to fight. Sometimes it's all a matter of minutes, even seconds. Within seconds, really, that episode was behind us, the terrorists were dead, and we moved on. And again, it was 2.5 hours of fighting. Now, he had a very close friend, David, who at one point they were both, there was a terrorist that shot both of them. He had, I think it was like 4 bullets, and 6 his vest protected. His friend David had 10 bullets. And they were both evac'd, and his friend David was actually passed away. He died on the plane. But even on the plane, they took him to the hospital. He was in and out. They spoke to Adva, and she was a news reporter for Channel 12. She met him at the hospital, and they said, we're going to have to amputate his arm. She said, no, we're not. And she took him to Ichilov Hospital, and there they saved his arm. And I'm going to skip a little bit just to really what this was all about, his story. He says, not many people can say that their partner saved their life. In my case, it's true twice over. First, in my head, my love for her kept me alive under that house when I was struggling to stay alive. When he was shot, he had to wait for evac. He was still under fire. They had to wait for a few hours till someone came to rescue them. And he said what kept him alive was just thinking of her. Then, when her decision to transfer me to Ichilov and to save my arm, even before that day, I felt how much she meant to me. But afterwards, it became clear as day. All doubts melted away. Now our relationship is different. It's bound up with life and death. She kept me alive, and she's also what I live for. So again, that's beautiful. And he actually said, he said everyone has a different reason. Why is this called One Day in October? He said growing up, he wasn't. There were terror attacks that he witnessed, but everyone knew that this is going to be this one day. Now we're all looking at it as something devastating. He said that one day was when we were under attack, and my commander, as we're shooting, we're being shot at, he says, "Could I take your water?" And he said, "Yeah, okay, go take my water." Why did the commander take the water? Because the family that they were protecting were thirsty. So he's saying, even in a time like this, when you see killing all around, the morality, that's the one day in October that we remember who we are in the end. We're the moral conscience of the world. And he also said something beautiful in an interview. He said, we're fighting two different wars. Hamas, they're fighting out of hate, and we're fighting out of love. And when you're fighting out of love, you will do anything, but you also maintain a certain dignity while you're fighting. And that is really the essence of Yadin Galman's story. One last story, and I'm sure everyone knows Daniel Peretz. His father was Rav Peretz from South Africa. And this is another beautiful story about, they live in Yad Binyamin. Again, just one day they had already one son that was by Nachal Oz in a tank. And the other son, he saw what happened. So he said, I'm going down. He took his pistol and he started going down. And as he's going down, he really sees the severity of it. So he takes Yonatan. So he sees there's a chaya that's wounded. He takes his vest. He takes his gun. He's slowly packing himself up, and they go. Now the connection between them, Yonatan is supposed to be married, and his brother Daniel is supposed to be his best man. And when I read that, I just found, wow, that's so beautiful that you rarely have that two brothers are so close. That every spare time, even though they're very different, one was more religious than the other one had different. It was just very different, but they were so close, so tight. And when Yonatan first started, he saved him and his friends that they met up with. They saved quite a few people wherever he went. He was also shot. He was wounded. And when he was in the hospital, as he's being evacuated, he calls his parents and he says, "Listen, I have to tell you a few things. First of all, I'm shot. I'm okay, but I'm shot. Second of all, you don't understand what's going on here. It's a real war. And third, I can't find Daniel." They found a few hours later. They said they found his tank. They had one body in the tank. 3 were not there. So for a week they had no idea what was going on. And meanwhile, after a week, there were 2 other people that were in the tank. They got phone calls from the army. They got the knock on the door, as they say, that their child was dead. And for Peretz, Daniel Peretz, they said, no, it seems that he's kidnapped. And so for months and months and months, I remember one of them spoke, my daughter was actually there, and they're giving a lot of chizuk and saying, don't worry, he'll come back. Mamash, like 3 days later, the army said that he's dead. And meanwhile, they had the wedding. The brother Yonatan, they were debating, should we have the wedding, should we not? They had the wedding. And as someone said, that was a wedding that had never had so many tears of sadness and so much dancing of happiness. It was one of the things that I think were over angels. Angels, they say, could do one thing. we could handle a lot more. And Daniel himself, he was one tank that was working, and he went from place to place. There was no headset, no communication. So wherever he went, he decided what's the best route to go. And it turns out that he was literally like 100 meters from his brother when he was taken. So the irony, but in all three of these stories we see, and this is what it boils down to, there's one word, and that really is love. It's so cliche, but it really boils down to, in all these stories, what's pushing is just the love. And I think for now, for everyone, whatever we're going through, when we have that in mind, when we know whatever we do, it's out of love for our family, for our fellow people, really we could do anything. And Bezat Hashem, let us just continue to feel the love. Thank you very much, and again, highly recommended. Any questions, I'm happy to try to answer.
What other books does your publishing do?
So I'm sorry, I'm from Koren Publishers. We have over 2,000 titles. We're one of the oldest ones in Israel. The Tanakh that we came out 60 years ago in the army, schools, that's the Koren Tanakh. Today, we have a whole subdivision of Koren. We have Magid, which is Rabbi Sachs, Rav Steinsaltz, books on Parasha. We have Tobi, which is part of the Tobi. We have Shai Agnon, this is more Zionistic. So we have Shai Agnon in Hebrew. We did Prime Ministers, Yehuda Avner. That was also our book. Rav Goren, a biography of Rav Goren. And of course, this in Hebrew, we sold about 50,000 copies. And in English, it just started. We sold over 10,000 copies so far. Okay. Thank you very much. Toda rabba v'Shabbat shalom.